and thanks for coming and listening to this. When Brian called me a couple of months back for this panel, he said that I should just speak about my experiences. So I'm an engineer by training, and I've been on my own for last 12 years. So basically, what I'll be talking about today is some of my personal experiences, what I've gained in doing being the so-called entrepreneur. And I didn't go to a business school because people like Al are probably much more qualified to talk about what to do in terms of business. But what I'm going to talk about is a couple of things which basically when an average person goes out on his own, his or her own, what are the things to be learned in the process? And this was a talk I gave a couple of years back to a bunch of MBA and engineering students at University of Hawaii. So I'll just gather a couple of points from that talk, and I'll go through it quickly because we don't have that much time. And hopefully we'll get a couple of takeaways. So this was at the height of basically the crash we went through in 2008. So everything was looking very bleak. So I took this sort of a quote from Charles Dickens, The Tale of Two Cities, that basically there are two ways to look at things. The glass can be half full or glass can be half empty. And the key thing is that when you try to go on your own, entrepreneur always tries to things in a positive way. So when times are tough, I guess as they were in 2008 and 2009, people were sort of hunkering down and they were trying to protect their jobs. But there were a lot of people who were also seeing this as an opportunity, and especially companies who are trying to start build new things. They had a pool of talent available which was not there for last 10, 12 years, because we went through the dot-com boom, and I've gone through that phase also where you had stuff to do, but you couldn't find people who would work on it. And the period we went through in 2008 and 2009, there were so many talented people available. So I think so one key takeaway is that when you're trying to do something, if you're passionate about that, you can always find good ways to come out of bad situations. And I think that's one of the things that is sort of what we call as the entrepreneurial spirit. And so this is just some examples. So if you look at the history of the kind of people that we have given, and these are some of the names that I sort of admire, but there are many more. So in mid-1900s, we had Henry Ford and Sam Walton. They have basically built companies which have lasted more than a century. And then 60 to 80s, we had this example of highly qualified tech entrepreneurs like Gordon Moore, who started Intel, Bill Gates, Microsoft, and somebody I really admire, Steve Jobs, who has changed the world 2, 3 times. I mean, because just by his vision, we are basically a thing like MP3 player, which is the music player, which has been around for 10 years, and he came in 2000 and he created an iPod, which everybody just starting to use, and he created a new industry. So I think these are the people who are basically thinking front, basically as Wayne Gretzky says, that don't be don't look at the puck where it is today, but where it's right now, but look at where it's going in the next shot. So that's where sort of the vision has to be. And obviously, and the list goes on, like Mark Andreessen, who changed the way we look at web. So in 1993 and 94, when the World Wide Web came, I remember I was in grad school and everybody was using this new tool, Mosaic, in 93 and 94. And as in next 2 years, there was so much growth just because of the way people got connected. And that was the start of a new age. So that was also a defining movement. So I think so these are some of the examples where people were thinking out of the box and utilizing the current things that are available to them in a way that could change the world in so to say. And the same goes for Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, everybody of us has seen Social Network, and probably will see more in next Oscars. So I think so. This was sort of uh, one point that I wanted to make, that coming out from a very dismal situation, everybody has to look at what's positive and use their talent in the most positive way. And that's true for entrepreneurs, that's true for the university research coming out and trying to commercialize it. So people have to get together and think in different ways. This was, again, I think I'll skip something. And so this was another question I asked people, like, why be on your own? So one is to follow your dream, and other is to realizing your true potential, be catalyst to change, be your own boss. And many times there's no option, because you are basically pushed to the wall and you have to get out from there. So I think these are some of the things which you find some commonality on how the different entrepreneurs went on their own. So I think so one of the key things I wanted to talk about today was basically, so when I first started being on my own, this was in late 90s, so I did a company with bunch of 4 engineers. All of us were not even 30 at that time. And we were thinking that we had some idea, and this was in semiconductor space. We were trying to build a chip which would do very efficient voice processing and aggregate a lot of voice channels in consuming the lowest power. So the reason we were trying to do that was because we had the skills to develop such a thing, and we had acquired those skills in studying through our grad school and stuff like that. But we also saw an opportunity that the market was changing. The packet switch networks, what we call as POTS, the regular road telephone line, was not going to be around for a long time. And so we started developing this idea, and we were banging doors in Silicon Valley. We were going to the Sand Hill Road, but nobody would give money, because making a silicon, a chip, and getting it to work would take at least 2 years and lots of money. And nobody will give money to 4 engineers who thought that we could do it. And so I think that was one of the things that we had the sort of a commitment to do that. And then we found one person who was willing to risk some money on this kind of a team. And then ultimately, it was up to us to prove that we could do it, and we were successful. And this was basically for voice over IP. So this was in late 90s, and voice over IP was just coming out. And as we know that we went through some hiccups, the whole telecom market crashed after the dot-com bust. But since 2003, 2004, we have seen such a big ramp of the technology, and some of the things we developed is basically fundamental in terms of how the servers work and how they sort of accommodate the voice. So that was some of my personal experience, the kind of things we went through in growing the company and basically learning from how the whole Silicon Valley works, how the VC industry works. And so I tried to capture some of it. I don't know how much time I have, but I'll try to at least talk about a couple of things. And so I think so that was in late 90s. And then after a few years later, I did another company where it was a very different kind of company, again in technology space, but this was completely bootstrapped without going to any VCs. And so what I realized was that after having gone through 2 cycles of bust, the whole VC industry and also the entrepreneurial community had learned that they have to be very conscious of the cost, and they need to do a lot of work upfront to sort of validate their ideas. And the whole industry, in some sense, had become more efficient. So this was just in course of 10 years that had happened. And we have seen that a lot of VC firms, a lot of the mid-tier VC firms collapsed because they had a lot of churn and there's a lot of consolidation there. So one of the things what has sort of become different now is that when you start a company, you always not have to rely on going to angels or VCs to get the money. Uh, we are living in a world where the risk of failure has been brought down considerably because we have so many tools available to us. And so one of the key couple of things which are very important are basically one is just the communication barriers, communication tools are so good. Like today, you can sit in Westwood and still communicate with people in Eastern Europe or in Korea with no cost to yourself. Like there's Skype, and those are the things, those are the tools that a lot of good entrepreneurs are using today to start good companies uh, because of this world becoming flat, you're basically uh, your talent is not your local talent, but it's basically how can you exploit the global talent anywhere in the world to make products for wherever it's needed. And I think that's something that I realized in doing my second company, where I had a couple of people in Silicon Valley. The development team was in Barcelona, in Spain, and we were selling to people in Asia because that's where most of the consumer electronics is being made. And this was a totally bootstrapped company of 7, 8 people working in a totally diverse environment. We didn't have a corporate headquarters. So I used to joke with people that if you want to meet, we used to tell them that let's meet at our corporate headquarters in Irvine, which is the Starbucks against the Irvine Spectrum. So I think so those are the things which are becoming a norm, and a lot of entrepreneurs are sort of adapting it to come to a stage where people like Steve and Al, whose specialty, basically when you come to a stage where you really need a structure, that's where VCs and good law firms can really help you. And I think those are the efficiencies which are improving in today's world. So I think I'll give it to Steve now.